Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the October 26th meeting of the GIS Advisory Council. So today we have a fairly packed agenda. We're going to go through a number of updates and priority topics from the various working groups. And then we'll center on a couple of discussions with the GIS strategic plan that Carl's been working on, as well as a update of where the state is at with NextGen 911 and addressing in general from Dan Jaya out of the DESPI. So with that, we'll do kind of introductions of the council members as a way to take roll call. So I'll just go down the list here. So I'm Alfredo Herrera, and I am here. Scott, I believe, is coming on late. We'll acknowledge him in a minute. If you could go right down the list, go ahead, Stu.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stuart Deland. I'm a GIS environmental analyst and admin for CTT.
Good afternoon, Jenny Pacherio, Connecticut DOT.
Lisette, you can speak on behalf of Gary.
Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Sorry. This is Dan Achaya. I'm the GIS coordinator for 911, and I represent DESPI.
Oh, sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
Hi, Lisette Stone here for the Department of Public Health, representing Gary Archambault.
Okay. Eric Stone may be in transit and maybe a little bit late, so we'll skip him over to Mark.
Mark Hoover, the GIS director at MetroCog.
Thad Dimkowski, GIS analyst, South Windsor, representing CCM.
John Guskowski, a planner from Tyche Planning and Policy Group, representing CCM.
Emily Wilson, Yukon.
Peter on the call? Or Meg? All right. With that, we'll acknowledge them as they come on in a bit. So moving on. Thank you all for joining this call. As I've mentioned before, we're trying to kind of increase engagement of the council members and the discussion and kind of create a more robust discussion amongst this group to kind of have you take a more active role in the advising and advisory aspect of your role on this council. So just kind of keep that in mind as we start discussing all of the various updates and the presentations that are ensuing. At this time, I will actually open it up for public comment. So if anybody that is not a member of the council would like to say something, now would be a good time. I think the best way to do that is if you want have something to say, I think just going forward, just raise your hand. We'll keep an eye on that and call on people accordingly. All right. Doesn't sound like anybody's got comments, so we'll kind of keep right on rolling along. Oh, sorry. So priority topics and working group updates. We're going to go through a number of different updates of things that the GIS office has been doing. Some of these things you have heard about before, and just giving a general update. And some of these things are somewhat new. So with that, we'll proceed right into the first thing, which is GIS office communications and outreach. Through our conversations with many of you and on and off the council, we have kind of identified a really strong need for stronger kind of communication from the GIS office and what we are doing and what's going on. We've heard you loud and clear, so we're kind of our aim to kind of start resolving this is to create a newsletter that we intend to release after every GIS Advisory Council meeting. The general format, like as you can see there on the left side of the screen, that is the template of the newsletter that we are going to be producing. Generally, we're going to give a recap of the updates that we provide in the council meeting with a fair bit more detail, but just have it be in a place that's kind of written and semi-permanent so that if anybody wants to refer back to it, they can go look. We are also going to be summarizing the discussions and the happenings of each GIS Advisory Council meeting in this newsletter, as well as listing upcoming events up until the following GIS Advisory Council meeting. So it would always kind of look ideally 2 months ahead at a time. At a later date, we will probably add additional things, like if we have major announcements or new applications, we will likely kind of add those there as links or a place to kind of have those resources, and we'll just kind of create a series of these are built-in experience builders. So we'll be creating a series of experience builder apps, and we'll create a gallery on the GeoData portal where all of these can be found. And just kind of creates a really good point in time snapshot of kind of like where the GIS office is at and what are the happenings of the advisory council in between sessions, if you will, as a way to kind of start the conversation and have a more consistent place for people to look stuff up to see what we're doing and what we're up to. Like I said, the first one we're intending to release on November 1st, so give us a few days to kind of summarize the happenings of this meeting and then kind of put it out for everybody to see. The other update on the communications and outreach is we have been increasingly talking to additional state agencies. Some of the examples are Department of Agriculture, continued work with SHPO and DECD, DSS, Department of Correction, and DPH. To kind of make sure that when they have activities that are geospatial in nature or want to answer questions that can be answered through understanding location, that we're there to help, and just generally wanting to increase capacity throughout the state. So we just wanted to acknowledge that we are beginning that process, and we've been preliminarily kind of like starting some projects with all of the various agencies to kind of get that off the ground. I can pause here if anybody has any questions on either of these two topics. Moving on. So aerial acquisition. I realize I just talked about this at NEARC, but I'll just kind of recap it again because not everybody was there. Aerial imagery is, 2 flights, one this year, one in 3 years. Dewberry is doing the work. They're very much underway in processing and creating the stuff. They are a little bit behind schedule on the deliverable, but they should still be have the data in around the end of the year. Just to quickly recap the specific products that we purchased is 3-inch 4-band imagery, the QL1, as USGS now calls it, QL1 HD, which just means it has a higher point density than normal QL1 LiDAR data. Our DEM will be a 0.5 meter DEM, the 1 foot contours, building footprints for every structure larger than 100 square feet, and level of detail to build 3D buildings as well as a 3D terrain model. The image you see here, I think I may have showed it last time, is a sample of the data that we are getting. Like the next couple of slides are some examples of some of the imagery. Here's a good example of downtown New Haven and the orthocorrection that's being done on these. The image on the left is from the 2019 USGS flight, which was not orthocorrected, and then the one on the right is from this year's collection, and it has been corrected. As you can see, there's a pretty dramatic difference in that building there on the corner, as well as the Ecuadorian embassy. You can kind of see that driveway that's behind it in the orthocorrected imagery, whereas that's completely occluded in the non-adjusted imagery. Beyond that, lots of eye candy. The point cloud is, in a word, spectacular. As you can see, the Connecticut Science Center there, it looks very, very accurate to what the building is actually there. This is the level of quality of data that we are going to be getting. That being said, some of the many of the buildings, the 3D buildings, will not be quite at this level of quality. That's why we specified level of detail 2. This is much more representative of what we are going to see with that data. Although this is also probably closer to actually level of detail 3 than what so, there's a bit of a balance and a bit of communication back and forth with Dewberry as to the expectations versus the level of effort required to produce all of this data, because it is proving quite difficult, and it's the whole state. So there's a lot to go through. The other point to note is that the building footprints are being produced from the LiDAR and not the imagery. The hope there is to have more positionally accurate building footprints as to where that aren't affected as much by building lean in the imagery in the non-orthorectified areas. One more note is we are working on a QA/QC process for when we actually get the full data deliveries. Primarily, there's going to be a lot to do, and we want to make sure that we check all of the data that we are receiving. We did ask for them to have a third-party review on all of this, and they are doing that, but it still behooves us to check their work regardless, because we may, the more eyes, the better. Carl is leading the effort there to create, some automation and some procedures to target areas of interest for review, because it's kind of difficult to lawnmower all 5,200 square miles. It's not Alaska, but it's still a lot. We will be reaching out for assistance from, the council members or anybody that has expertise in this realm and would like to help. Please reach out to Carl or myself, and we can get you connected and plugged in with this effort. It's going to be important, and so many data sets are going to be derived and produced out of this raw data that it's kind of important that we get it right. So it's important for us to make sure that we do our due diligence and review the data as we get it. From there, just want to remind everyone that a lot of this data will be served out through the CT Eco website, thanks to Emily Wilson's help. One point to note here is that the difference between what will be hosted on CT Eco versus the Geodata portal is all of the raster stuff will be on CT Eco, plus I think the contours, if I remember correctly. And then the rest of the vector data, building footprints, other derived products will be hosted directly through the Geodata portal. Once again, I will pause here if anybody has any questions on this topic. Ready, moving on. Last few updates. Parcel and camera updates. They're kind of largely in a little bit in the similar state to the when we last spoke. However, as many of you know, that last 10% takes the 90% of the work. We've been making very good and steady progress. The parcel data set is all in a single schema, every parcel in the state. We did not try or to correct any of the geometry. We wanted to leave kind of like the messiness on the borders there, just so that, it can be acknowledged, and we're kind of acknowledging the source of truth on this. But it is all in a very simplified schema, and we've been validating and checking all of the link fields and making sure that we can connect it to the cameras. We've also produced kind of a simplified version of the CAMA schema that is submitted to OPM, kind of like a minimum viable product, if you will. So it's about 35 to 40 fields that we feel are kind of vital as we produce the final data set that will be published with the associated viewers. We are going to be open to feedback if we need to, if there's just something critical that's missing. We will be asking around before we kind of go fully final with with that, just from a few key stakeholders, just to make sure we haven't missed anything. Although I think we pretty much got it. I see David making a funny face, but we're still kind of wanting to make sure. Broadband mapping, I think I actually will let David speak on that one because I'm not sure on the update.
I would just say we selected 38 fields that we thought would be the most likely to be used and that were most consistently in every town's CAMA. So because they're different vendors and different towns get different reports and old versions of Vision, et cetera, we have highly varied data. And so standardizing that across all 139 fields that are actually requested is impossible. And then very difficult even when it is there for everyone because of the number of different names of fields and that we're not getting the standardization we need for that. So while we would love to help if somebody is missing a field that is not there, I would just be scared of promising that we can do that because it might not exist in the CAMA that we get. It might exist in a very spotty fashion, or we are not confident that the values that we were provided fit within the domains that they should. So just in general, like if there's something, well, we'd be happy to talk about it. I just, I don't want to say that we can sort that out.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to imply that we would do it. It'd just be, that we're open to the conversation and see if it's possible. And then David, if you could talk briefly about the broadband update, just make sure.
Sure. So also, we finally just got the last submission, which was over a month late. The FCC delayed their submission process, which had knock-on effects, and then we got some wonky data that I had to go back and say, like, no, please give me the correct data. So we're a little bit behind schedule in terms of receiving that data, but it shouldn't affect getting our maps out by December 1st. So I'm working on those as we speak.
And then with the last two updates, they're kind of the same for both. The both documents are in various states of final review and editing, and they will be submitted to the GIS office for final review and publication soon thereafter. So, unless Emily or Thad have anything to say on either of those topics, we can pause there and then move on. All right. So I am now going to pass it off to Carl to discuss the geospatial strategic plan. Take it away, Carl. You're muted, Carl.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can hear me through the office, but not through the mic. We're going to be talking about the geospatial strategic plan today. This is the middle phase of the three-part plan that we've been working on since the spring. Alfred, do I have a control here?
Not exactly. You can just tell me to go to the next one.
So if you have not
here.
yet, make sure you refer to the memo that Alfredo sent out that summarizes the parts and also the critical 5 goals that we'll be discussing today. Next slide, please.
You can click. I gave you control. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
First of all, a shout out to the strategic planning work group, many of it who are on this call for helping at various times in this process. The strategic plan is a process driven by statute, and we have an annual requirement looking out 5 years. We will again repeat this process next year, but they'll probably at a far smaller scale. This year, we focus on creating baseline information in the data collection phase. Basically, the strategic plan is a management activity to set priorities, goals, and adjust the organizational direction. Again, we have 3 parts: a data collection plan that includes surveys, interviews, and a literature review. We have a strategic plan, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is mostly focused on prioritizing 5 goals. And then we have an implementation component that will be finishing out before the November 15th GIS Day. So this is where we sit in terms of the overall calendar. You can see we've worked our way through 2/3 or so of the activities, and we're down to the strategic goals with objectives and activities. We will have a presentation in November for the GIS Day, and then the final documents will be produced by the end of the year in December. Just to be clear here, the goals that we're talking about, these strategic goals, are come out of this Geospatial University of Connecticut, and this is sort of an overview of all the different working components in the system. There's the workforce, the processes, the governance, operations, technology, and they all interact. And so this data collection process asks questions about this whole universe, and we are squeezing this information down to a few critical components. Just an example of the kind of thing that was collected in the data collection phase. We had surveys that were open-ended. Those were compiled. This is a question about the GIS office. We had a variety of other questions as well. And then once we had those 3 components, the surveys, the interviews, and the literature review finished, we then had an internal and external process to prioritize from this list of over 50 critical themes. We did one internally. This is an example of that, where people ranked and discussed which issues they thought were important. We did an outreach at Farmington Library. Where about 20 people came and voted on the big themes and then specific issues. And you can see we actually had them walk around and use little dots, and had a very spirited discussion afterwards about what people thought were the important issues. So again, this is a squeezing process. We started on the left with the data collection. We went through, a first cut of organization and prioritization. Then we had the internal and external reviews, and again, another squeeze, and then another iteration where we discussed the themes after we had a first draft written. Okay, and out of this process, these are the 7 or so critical themes that we ended up with. They involve the GIS office, supporting the local communities, the role of the advisory council, optimizing the use of the geodata portal, a longstanding issue related to data standards and acquisition of data, planning for future funding, and then different sorts of societal and equity issues. In this format, we are following. I reviewed many different styles and different plans. The 2 that we focused the most on were from the Department of Commerce. They have a geospatial strategic plan, and this is very clear and logical. They start with a goal, they move to an objective, and then out of that objective comes activities and deliverables. And we like that clarity a lot. There was also a very nice one from the UN. It's a little more graphic, and this will probably end up as a format in the GIS Day presentation. But it summarizes a tremendous amount of information in one discrete location, and so that's very desirable. So for this version you saw in the memo I sent you, I took all of these ideas, input we received both internally, externally, and then I squeezed it down to 5 goals, the related objectives, and each objective having 1 or more activities. So 5 goals, a few objectives per goal, and then 1 or more activities per objective. So that gives a nice hierarchy. And here are those 5 strategic goals. The first one is use effective governance policies and standards that manage geospatial data. Number 2, implement a sustainable funding model for imagery acquisition, GIS data, and geospatial technologies. 3, increase access to data, spatial analysis, web services, and visualization capabilities for local governments, community organizations, the private sector, and stakeholders. Number 4, provide direct analytic support and enhance capacity building for state agencies. And number 5, broaden communication and engagement across different levels of government and other organizations. I should tell you, having somewhere between 3 and 8 goals is very standard, and 4 or 5 seems to be the sweet spot if you look at the various strategic plans that have been put out in the last 10 years. So this fits that format. And again, we have this structure where for every goal there's an objective and related activity. And again, refer to the memo for the details. We're hoping that you will have responses and comments to this, but you can provide written comments to myself or Alfredo. Things that I ask you to consider are the scope of the goals appropriate? Is the tone appropriate? Are the objectives matching the goals? And are the related activities coming logically out of the objectives? I should tell you that we will have deliverables associated with these activities, objectives, and goals as part of our final document. We are still having internal discussions about what that format will look like. The activities hints at some of those deliverables, but they're not fully explicit yet. So with that, I will leave it to the advisory council to ask any questions or make any comments they'd like to.
Lisette, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I have one comment on behalf of Gary. He suggested adding SMART, S-M-A-R-T milestones to this strategic plan, so the state can measure progress towards meeting the goals. And the acronym for that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I think that's a very valid criticism. We had not put metrics with our document yet because we have not fully fleshed out the deliverables. So we want to make sure our deliverables match an objective and a metric. So thank you.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Carl, great work. One comment I did have is on section 5. It's outreach. It seemed like it kind of focused on like current GIS users, and I just know if we need to, emphasize reaching out to other non-GIS organizations across the state. I know, we already do work with the assessors organization and things like that, but I don't know if there's other groups that we want to specifically mention in part of these, objectives, reaching out and giving presentations or participating in their annual meetings, letting them know what we've done as a state as far as GIS.
Yeah, I think that's a very legitimate. We've talked about this from the beginning that was an important goal, and a lot of the stakeholders thought that was an important goal. If it's not clear, we'll make sure that is clear that we're going to try to reach out to different communities and work professional groups that don't necessarily have a lot of connection with the core GIS community.
Great, thanks.
Other comments or questions?
Any other comments? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
If there are none, feel free to send us information or ideas or thoughts offline on email.
Yeah, one other thing I will also add here is as we continue working on the mission and vision statements for surrounding the strategic plan, we will be reaching out to the various council members individually to kind of discuss those because we do intend to speak about them at the GIS day in that presentation. So we want to make sure that you guys have seen them and have a chance to opine on them before we kind of like, well, talk about it in a public setting, I suppose. So just wanted to make sure that we threw that out there and that you guys were aware that that's coming, and we'll be reaching out within the next couple of weeks to have a brief chat about the mission and vision statements as we kind of get them closer to completion. So any additional questions about the strategic plan or the work surrounding it, or just general comments? All righty, and we will, oh, someone wants to speak? Sorry. All right, then we'll move along to the next topic, and that is addressing and Next Gen 911, where Dan Jaya has prepared a presentation for us. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and we'll see if he can get his queued up.
All right. Thanks, Alfredo. Let me see. Share. And let's see. Generic. Wait a minute. Sorry. There we go. And then, all right, can everyone see my screen, as I always say? Let me just turn it on.
Yep.
Does it, can everyone see the whole thing? It's like a,
yep.
Okay. Sometimes I have a very wide screen, and sometimes it gets cut off. Hi everyone. My name is Dan Chaya. I'm the GIS coordinator, manager, I guess now, for the Connecticut's 911 system. We're part of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection in the Division of Statewide Emergency Telecommunications. I'm going to, if you don't mind, real quick, sorry. Actually, I can't even get to it. Never mind. I had a list of all the different acronyms that I was going to use, but I'll just try to include them in there. I'm going to say the acronym DSET a lot. That's just the Division of Statewide Emergency Telecommunications. If I use DESPI, that's the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. So my presentation is mainly on the addressing side of a 911 and everything that we've done for the past 20 years and in the last 17 that I've been there. But wanted to start off with just some basic Connecticut 911 information. State of Connecticut has had 911 since it started in 87. They rolled it out completely by October of 89. We have 102 primary PSAPs. That's a PSAP is a 911 call center. Basically all it is. It's any place that if you call 911, they could get your call. So we have a couple of ones we call secondaries. Those are ones that they get a call transferred to them from a primary. And those are mainly just state police troops on the highways. There's a couple of them. Some of them are also primary. Of those 102, we have town ones, which are the ones in yellow on that map. You know, that's just a town has decided they want to do it by themselves. Multi-town, which is 2 towns. Regional, which is more than 2 towns. We have state ones, which are the state police troops, and Yukon is its own PSAP too. And then we also have a federal one, which is kind of a strange one where they only do landline telephone calls, you know, like the old style telephone calls, and their calls go directly down to Norfolk, Virginia. They've consolidated all their 911. Wireless calls for that area still go to the regular troop, to the regular PSAP, whether it's Waterford, Groton, or Ledyard or something like that. 2022, that's the last set of complete data we had a little over 2 million telephone calls, 911 calls. 83% of them are wireless. I've been at 911 since 2006. In 2006, that number was probably 25% wireless. So we've seen the absolute explosion in wireless telephones and the dropping of landline calls and just how it's completely taking over. It's not complete. I mean, we still have 17% landline calls, and we need to accommodate that. But it's amazing how complete it's changed over and how people don't. I mean, heck, my parents are almost 80 and they don't have a landline phone anymore. Oh. Hey, Alfredo, my screen just went black. Sorry. Alfredo?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, just went.
It looks dim, but I can still see it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
dim, and then it was there, and then it disappeared. I don't know what. And now my mouse just froze up. Oh, lovely. Oh, wait a minute. Wait,
Wonderful.
what's going on?
You might want to try turning off your video for your camera. That might help.
Let me see.
I think it's back, Dan. We can see the slides.
It's funny. I have two monitors here, and in fact, I just set this up yesterday. I have my laptop monitor, and I have my main monitor, and I can see everything on my main monitor, but I mean on my laptop monitor, but I can't see my my screen. Yeah. Okay. Can you see? Sorry. Wait a minute. All right. So does everyone see a slide that says Connecticut 911 or a slide that says addressing has always been important to 911?
Connecticut 911. We're on Connecticut 911.
Okay. Next slide. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm having some technical. Yeah, my screen just went blank.
Now it says addressing has always been important to
Okay,
911.
perfect. All right. Well, I guess I'm just going to use my. I guess I'm just going to use my side monitor here. So addressing has always been important to 911 ever since the beginning. When in 1989, if you called 911 and you got and you reached the PSAP and you had to tell them your address, and they would dispatch to that address to the enhanced 911 system, which was our previous system, where they started to actually provide an address to that call, and then, but with no map. To then E911 created a map so that you could also have a you could see the location. It's always been important. Address is what you need to dispatch the call. The driver of the mapping, ironically, is actually been the wireless. And I apologize if you can't really see it, but there's a circle on that map on the left-hand side where it says E911 workstation. There's that's a very old picture of a wireless call, and it was needed because there wasn't any information unless you wanted to just say, please, where's your call? Like, where are you calling from, and get an address from the person. Then they could dispatch. With a map, you could actually figure out where the person was, and you didn't have address points at the time. The system didn't have enough memory in it to like actually use address points, but you could use street center lines and ranges and cross locations to figure out where a person was and to dispatch. With our new system, and that's the one on the right side, we have the address points. So now we can now tell where the caller is calling from, which is a really nice setup for wireless, where we now know, okay, this person's here on the map. Oh, that's 285 Preston Avenue, which happens to be the state police academy. Now that's all at 911 is two different things. There's the back end routing side for sending calls around, and then there's also there's the workstations. At the workstations, we've had mapping, which is great for location. With NG911 now, which is the next generation 911, which is a multitude of things, including text to 911 and IP-based calls and everything like that. The one for me that matters most to me is spatial routing. We now can take any telephone call as long as it provides location information when the call goes through. we can route the call spatially based on it. It's pretty simple. It's point and polygon. It's just if you're in this polygon, so on that map, which I apologize is really tiny, if you're in the if you're at that 7 Mish Drive and you make a 911 call, it's going to go to Norwich PD. If I were to go in and move that boundary over and flop it over into the other PSAP, the call, once the data is updated, sorry. I'm sorry about that. My dogs decided to bark at squirrels right when the presentation was happening. Sorry. So now when we have a, we can dynamically, once we update this layer, we can now move the call to a different PSAP simply with the mapping, which is really nice, really cool, really modern. Instead of using tabular routing and in numbers and using, kind of an older technology, we're using GIS. Like GIS is driving the 911 system now. A little history of our addressing data. When we put in the new 911 system or the enhanced mapping, we had to have some layers of information. So we put in a street center line. It's the one we've had for 20 years. We've been updating it. And then guessing about 2005, we got a hold of that first aerial imagery that got loaded in, so that we were able to have like a true map. There were some other layers in there, but those are the main ones. And those were and the center line was the one that we were able to use to geocode any landline telephone calls. Address points, I put 2015 down. 2015 is basically like the publishing date, but I believe we started it 2014, maybe even 2013. We started using the old, the 2011 broadband project. We had all sorts of parcel data and address data that was used. And we went in and basically just formatted it and put it into one big data set. And any address point data from a town, we took it and we loaded it straight in, maybe did a little bit of formatting. Any town that just had parcels, we basically built a parcel centroid for each spot, loaded it, and then made an address point for it, loaded it in. The one thing we did do at a later date, is so we would have it, basically about where the names are on this layer. We would have a point. What we did later was we took the 2012 building footprints that we had done, and wherever we could definitively say that's the spot where it should be, we moved all those parcel points to the building, so that it works really well in like a subdivision where we were able to stick the point right on top of the house. So we had building footprints or building address points to go along with the parcel points for the other spots. We've done some other things where we've have building entrances. Sometimes it depends on, we want to have the best. Every single point we have is like on the spot where it's supposed to be, and we want to make sure it's the best. So if it's better to have a building entrance, we use a building entrance. If it's a single family home, it's usually just building centroid. It's good enough for our needs. A few more of the specs for the addressing data. All of it that we use, so whether it's our street center line for address ranges or the address point database, is it's anything that has a NINA data field in it follows the NINA standard, which it's not to bore anyone, but it's just a format for how you spell a name, how many fields, it's basically just basic schema information. If we have a field that's not in that data set or not in that standard, we just give it our own name. We have a few fields like that, but it's mainly everything is Nina based. And it's based on the newer NG91 standard for a 91. I think it's like the 2020. It might be the 2019 standard. There is a newer standard that I have to check out. With few exceptions, the data is based on municipal data or data that is approved by them. And I'll explain this more later, but we want like the person that is in charge of making the address, or naming the street, giving the address its numbers. We want that person to be where we get the source from, or that organization. We don't want to mess with just made up stuff. This is 911. We want it right. As of 10/1/23, for the address points, we have just shy of 1.2 million address points in there. And like I said, it's a mixture of building points, it's a mixture of parcel points, building entrances. The 911 system for geocoding is pretty straightforward. It's just really the only difference is, instead of using like a zip code or a town name, we use a 911 community name. 911 community name most times is the town name, but there's a few differences in format of how it's spelled, and we have stores is in there for Yukon, and the tribal nations are in there too. So it's the same thing. Address, number, street name, and then city or something like that. Like, we use standard geocoding or geocoders from Nina for it. As of last month, the Alley database, which is the phone company's database for most of the telephone addresses, we're hitting at about 99.5% of all those records. So what that means is we took all the records and geocoded them, and 99.5% of them. There are duplicates in there, so it's not like it's not unique addresses. It's just there could be, if there was there's 1.5 million records in there. If 1.5 million of them all say the same address, then we're 100% geocoding. So we have the database, or we have the addressing data sets. How do we keep them updated? Really, it's 5 different ways, and it's explained on the slide. I mean, it's usually a good source for us is, believe it or not, people still get telephone service with a landline or a VoIP telephone, like a cable phone, and they need service, and it's brand new subdivisions that are still getting it. So we'll get messages from the phone company, because we're in charge of managing their end of the addressing. Like, hey, we have this new road, it's GIS Drive, and we have someone at 50, we want to add 50 GIS Drive in, and it's not in there. So we'll go in there, okay, and we'll go to the town, and I'll explain this more, and we'll verify it, and then we'll add that information to our addressing. A lot of times it's 911 driven, like the PSAPs will send us updates. Hey, found a misspelling. Hey, there's a new subdivision, check it out. We usually, like, for those things, all we need is, hey, there's something here, and it's spelled, figure it out, send it, and then we can go from there. We don't need a lot of information, just need like a message that says there's something new. Town driven, towns, I have a few towns out there that will send me a letter that it's a standard thing they send to the post office and other people that say, hey, new street, new subdivision, a change in address for a town parcel, things like that. That gets used. That's a source for us. Town data, OPM gets the new parcel data. We'll load it in and look at it and say, oh, look, there's a new subdivision, and we'll add it to our data. The other thing is, it's usually when we get it is the aerial imagery. Like, we're like, oh my God, look at this giant subdivision that we didn't even know about, but it's showing up there in the glorious 3-inch pixels, and we'll do the research to add it in. Once we know that there's something new, we have data sources that we use, and I'm going to call them, I'll authoritative and non-authoritative. The authoritative, like I said, it's the towns. It's government data that has been approved and vetted, and that's the one that that's the gold standard. That's what I like to use. Whether it's municipal GIS data, it's municipal online GIS assessment data. A little hack, if anyone ever wants to find their towns or a town's GIS data or assessment data, is type the town name, Connecticut, and GIS. It pops up every single time. When those sources can't get us, like if we have something so brand new that it's not even on those in that data yet, we go to a human source. So it might be someone designated by the town, an assessor, an engineer, someone that we know will know the information, and we'll email them or maybe have to call them if necessary and get that information from them. Like, hey, brand new street, don't see it anywhere. Do you have any data on it? Like, oh yeah, that's brand new street. Here's the as-built for the subdivision or something like that, and then we'll use that. DOT street data, I list it because it is official. That could either be the old TRU mapping or anything they have, or just street lists with names. Used to be more important. I don't use it as much anymore because the municipalities have gotten so good with getting all their data online that most of the time the first two things on that list are what we do, and then the third one is sometimes. That's about it for like authoritative data. I mean, it's amazing, in 17 years, how much more information is out there. We also have non-authoritative sources, and they're listed there, and I'll explain the UPS one. But mainly those things on that list we use them as it's a source. They need to support what the authoritative source is doing. So sometimes we'll find that a town's assessment data, the street naming doesn't match what the engineer is saying. So when we have that, if we can get an answer from the town that where like they say yes or no on what the name is, then we'll use that. Sometimes we can't get an answer or we need it really fast. We'll go to one of these sources, and like the USPS, we'll go to that and we'll look and see what they say. And if they match one of the two, then we might just say, okay, go with that one because the post office says it's right and the engineer says it's right. We're going to use that one. Some of the other sources too, like Google Street View, is one of the greatest things on the internet for me. I can use it to find. If I can't get a location, but I can get assessment data with a picture, and I can match a street view to a picture. I can locate things that I couldn't find any other way. Sometimes it's faster than asking a town for something. If I just need one thing and I can find it that way. So that's what it's more of a authoritative source. Like it's a non-authoritative source that supports an authoritative source, which is really nice. So that's basically how we get our GIS data, and it's been a long road, and it's a lot of information. It's been a lot of collection and a lot of emails over the years. The one thing we do know though is that there's a lot of information out there that we still don't have. We have a lot of the low-hanging fruit, like the parcels, things like that, where we can get it. But we need to formalize more of our partnerships, like we've talked with the strategic plan, about getting more addressing. One of the big ones is like multi-address parcels are my curse. It's anything from a town doesn't have individual condos on it. It has apartments. It has anything like that where the town doesn't have data because it's not a tax parcel, it's not that they don't care about it, they just don't have it. So a lot of that is, I've done it. We've done a whole bunch of apartment complexes and put all the addresses in there, or apartment unit buildings and stuff like that, or stores and things like that. But it's a lot of work. It's manual labor. You got to sit there and just put points on all the different spots, and it's a lot of work. And knowing that for a state, a GIS office for 911 simply can't do all that work. And besides the point, we're not the only ones that need GIS or need addressing for their needs. And we all know what, at all the different entities out there that use address points and street center lines and things like that. So we definitely are looking towards, and we've had talks with DOT and OPM and others about, like more formalizing and getting a better process so that we're all like rowing the same boat and getting all the same data together so that we don't have to do things separately, like the whole stovepipe thing. We just have to spell out all of our, all the responsibilities and, any sort of technical obstacles, like making sure we can replicate data and move data back and forth, stuff like that. It's doable, but it is something that we have to do. And it's something that we can, that obviously we're going to discuss more with the council. The big one too with any future opportunities is, with addressing is a local thing. So it obviously involves local municipal addressing people and anyone else. Yukon does their own addressing, so it's going to involve Yukon. It's going to involve it might involve the Postal Service. It might involve, but we have to involve them and give them the tools. Like for example, the old GIS Council, we had a state addressing guideline. We created it, pretty much done. The council was disbanded. We probably should formally adopt that at this level, just so we can give the town something to say, this is what we'd like you to do with your addressing, if you could get rid of duplicate street names, if you could do things like that, if you could, address on a line and, address on a sequential line and not do, weird halves and stuff like that. And then, obviously, just like we've done with the parcels, is give them like basic requirements. Really, for addressing this at the state level, you really don't need a lot of information. My experience with creating addresses from parcels, you really need to know what's the address number, what's the street name, the town name, which is, you'll know from the town. You need to know, does it have unit information? If it has unit information, what's the unit information? And then if someone's sending you information, you need to know a source. I have a source on every single address point that I have in there so that I know where it came from. It might just be a parcel data. It might be someone called me from the town. And that's really it. I mean, everything else you could collect. You could ask for map block lot numbers and stuff like that too, but you could figure that out by just joining the data to the parcel layer. There's really not a lot that we have to ask for. It's just specific little bits. Like, we need enough in order to make it a unique address and to be able to map to it. That's the important thing. I mean, that's really all we need. So it's not a lot of information. The other thing we all know too is we have to understand that municipalities have different amounts of resources. I mean, some cities and towns are going to can push data sets to us all day long, and other ones still, they're going to send you that parcel layer every year to OPM, and anything else is going to be a pile of hopefully digital copies of things that we're going to have to ask for. And that's going to be it. There's going to be towns like that's all they have. So, and unless we want to support them in different ways and give them a means to actually supply that, to have that data online for them, which works. But there might be times when a town says we don't have time. Here's a paper map, and that's when you say thank you, and you go and do it, and then you just do it yourself. Which it's not a lot of work. It's just we might have to do it ourselves, which I'm fine with. I always say, and I want to kind of end on this, is that good enough data is always better than perfect data later. It's if I can get something that works good enough, I will always put it in there. Okay, great. Paper map, good. I'll digitize it. I'll get the new aerial next year, and I'll go in there and I'll fix the road so it's absolutely perfect. I'll just get it in there, and then just go from there. But that's all I have. Thank you everyone for your time. This is if anyone needs to contact me, that's my contact information, and I'm open to questions, or if anyone wanted to discuss future opportunities or anything else, I'm here to talk about things, comments, whatnot. And I'm going to hit the X button and see what happens.
Looks like Mark has his hand up and Megan asked a question.
Okay, before anyone starts, first of all, I'm happy that Alfredo just talked to me, because the whole time I was talking, I'm like, am I talking to dead air for the past 20 minutes?
No, you're fine. You're just riveted in listening to your presentation.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to take Megan's question first, or if you want to have Mark ask his first.
Sure. Hey, Alfredo, sorry, real quick thing. Can you turn off my share? My screen is still off. I don't know what's going on.
I got you.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Everything just turned itself back on. Okay, good. Okay.
There we go.
All right.
Okay, cool.
So sorry. Who was asking me a question?
So Meg McGaffin was asked one in the chat, and then I think we had Mark and Lisette after that.
Okay.
Meg,
did you want to ask your question verbally?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll ask it
Yeah,
verbally.
Meg,
Sure. I was just wondering how you, in terms of, if you were to, do a guidance document, how do you manage the multiple apartment complexes with like multiple buildings and unit names? Is that simple, or is it complicated?
Well, yeah, something I should have mentioned too. With the NINA standard for addressing, which is NINA standard. I don't know if anyone remembers the old the FGDC addressing standard. It kind of came out of that, and it's bounced back and forth. They have a pretty robust format for adding multitudes of like subunit information to an address. So one of their goals, and I'll be honest with you, besides certain spots, I'm not sure how this would ever get implemented and managed, is they have NINA and NG911 world has a dream of having each telephone line in an area have an address. So imagine you're working in an office and you got a bunch of cubicles. Every single telephone has an address. Now,
how do you do that voice over IP?
Well, as long as the VoIP provider can provide that information into the 911 system. There's a whole besides the GIS, there's like telephone. NINA has standards for the type of outlets you're supposed to use in a 911 system. I mean, that's how it's everything.
So it is complicated.
It's very complicated. So
yeah,
it sounds great until you figure out that like an office would change stuff, and then you're changing it. I'm not sure that sort of level would require, like, you have to have the provider of the, like, you have to have so much oversight into that. But basically, for like a building, you could do it.
Dan,
Sorry.
so a quick question within that is, do we have a way to collect that currently? Or is that just something that we've just like, we can't do it?
The data set or the schema that we have, you could do that. Like you could put it in there and you could get it down to
Okay.
I know at least a room. I actually don't know about the phone, but I know at least the room. You could get it down because there's enough fields. Right now, we only use one of the fields. Long story, but we only use one of our sub-unit fields in the 901 system, but it's fleshed out to have all. So they have.
So we have the
4 or
capacity,
5.
but we're not
Yeah.
currently using
Yeah.
all of it. It's
Yeah,
what you're
it's
saying. Okay.
it's a lot of this stuff is like a lot of this stuff is yeah, we need to do it, but I haven't seen it yet. Like the whole like Carl sent me something earlier about Z level. I've got 13 more years till I can retire. I don't know if I'll see Z level. I honestly don't know. I might, but it's yeah, it's an interesting thing. But to answer your question, Megan, like we could go in there and like if you have 50 Main Street, building 1, floor 2, room 12, like we could put that in there. You could get down to that level. But it depends too. I mean, I kind of go back and forth, not to get into the weeds too much, but
hang on.
If you can do
Sorry,
an
Dan,
address.
let's I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask their question.
Okay.
Let's have Mark ask.
I could talk
question
forever
real
about
fast.
this.
Yep. Sorry.
All right. Thanks. So I mean, I've worked with NextGen to update addresses for some municipalities in my region, and the biggest issue I've had is with their update process. So I mean, you have this data at the state level, but there seems to be no way to update data for the municipalities that have their own PSAPs. And the process seems very archaic in the instances I've run into, which we've given them data, but we have to give it in their certain format. We have to update our GIS data. We send it to them. They, do their process and they publish it. We find a couple errors. We have to give them all the data all over again for them to publish it again. And it's gotten to the point where they now told me after our last time we did 2 updates, they told me I should update my GIS and then reach out to dispatch and they'll manually update it in their system, which seems like the exact opposite of everything we're going for with this whole statewide data set. So if we keep updating the data at the state level, but there's no way to integrate any of this data or to get this, there just doesn't seem to be a great update process for municipalities. And I don't know if you have any information or if that's a discussion we need to have with the different, CAD providers. But if we get all this data at the state and, the town I just updated was using data from 2000 because they had no way to update the data set, we need to find that integration, that link from the state data set back down to the municipalities.
Okay. Yeah, it's CAD's an interesting thing. I'll try to make this a short answer. We have nothing to do with CAD. Like my side of it is we handle the 911 side. So we handle getting the call answered at the right PSAP, and then once it's CAD, that's either the town, the region, whatever they're doing, that's the town's responsibility to load data for that. However, I do provide NextGen with the street center line, which I have to, pound into a round hole with a square peg to get it to work. I have to format it to their specific data for that to work. So I have to do that too. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, every vendor has doing different formats. I mean, I guess at the state level, we could do something where we tell them like, we have some sort of standard and go, we need you to do this, like, this is it, like, or beat them over the head with Nina, something like that. Cause I don't know if Nina handles dispatching. I really don't know, but it is a problem. Like I can't just tell them, here's the data, go for it. It's like, no. I have to change all the format, change all the names, change all of this to get it to work. but I send it to them. I don't know if they supply that to everyone in their next gen or if they just do CSP. I don't know, but it is a problem, but it is something we could look into.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Lisette, your question, please.
Yeah, piggybacking off of Mark's question, is there a statute or regulation that requires municipalities to update data and send it to the state on an annual or triennial basis?
We have a regulation that says PSAPs, which are town, they're either a town or an organization with a town, have to send us, when we ask them for data, they're supposed to provide it. I have never had to beat up a town with that regulation. I've always asked. I make a point when I ask for something, if I email a question, the word 9-1-1 is in the subject line. That usually gets people's attention because I don't think the town's scared of me. They're more scared of their fire department. So they don't want to, they don't want to be known as, well, why didn't you supply the data to the state for the 911 system? So I've never had to do that. And I honestly think if we told towns, listen, we need this data for 911, they'd figure out a way to get us any sort of data that we need.
Great. And then just a couple quick things. Is the street center line feature class publicly available or internal, like cross-agency internally available?
It's cross-agency available. There's an MOU that has to be signed, although we're working on getting rid of the MOU. It's because it's a licensed data product, or it started out as a licensed data product, but it is available. DPH should be getting it, but it is available.
And the last thing is, like, how do you receive and organize all the kind of piecemeal submissions to address updates? It sounds like you get phone calls and emails and letters physically.
Yeah, it's usually everything we do is usually, it's a lot of it's ad hoc. So if we find out, oh, there's a new street, we'll send out a request. Hey, do you have this data? They'll send it back. So it's usually just I have a list of things that I've done, and then I just have to make sure, oh, there's the email for it, and then I get it and I update my data so that it's in there.
Thank you so much.
I think I was next.
You're welcome.
So this is kind of a broader question. Now that we have a GIS office, and there seems to be a lot of overlap with these layers like roads and the broadband work and the other stuff. So is there coordination happening between these different things? Like, Dan, it seems like you do a lot of stuff kind of manually and piecemeal. I give you a lot of credit for handling all that stuff, but is there a way to streamline it with all of the other efforts going on? I don't see Dan. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I did just walked in. I don't want him on the screen. Yeah, we've had discussions about merging a lot of these things. Like DOT is working on a street layer, and we've had initial conversations about how do we get that data, like how do we turn that into our street center line so that we don't have to deal with licensed data and things like that. And then the address points, OPM and us have had initial conversations about how to combine efforts so that, we have one big addressing database for everyone, so that, Secretary of State can use it for their election stuff, and anyone else can use it.
Yeah, I guess I'll just put a huge shout out for that. Like, that's kind of the purpose of all this coordination, to have one most accurate data set that everyone's using. So, yeah.
Thanks.
So before I call on Scott, I just wanted to make sure if any other council members had any questions. I will ask. I do have a question, just kind of so I guess my question is, like, you went over a lot and you kind of covered it, kind of like where we are at and where we would like to be. You know, now that kind of piggybacking off of what Emily said, like GIS office is here. We're wanting and willing to help. How can we do so? I mean, I think really one of the biggest things is we need to be proactive about receiving data from the locals and the kind of the source of truth, and then as well as figuring out a way to kind of be a little bit more automated in the publication of data down to the people that need to use it. And as a result, kind of tying back to Mark's question. So my question within all that is like, how can we help? I mean, like, there's a lot of stakeholders here that can, you know, that leverage not insubstantial resources to kind of make this happen. And as you so keenly pointed out, 911 is important to everyone. And, you know, fire departments tend to make a heck of a lot of noise about how important it is in particular. So, yeah, I mean, like, there's would it, like, you know, there's like NG 911 and Next Gen 911 as an initiative has a lot of kind of guidance documents and planning, you know, like frameworks. Do we have a planning document about how we're going to move over to that kind of system? And you know, like, and kind of like, is there, you know, do we like, is there a more formal way that we can kind of like express this interest and desire to help, as well as facilitate you in the transition to a true Next Gen 911 and adhering to those modern standards? Sorry, there was a lot there.
Let me take a deep breath. Yeah, yeah, I would just say that if we just need to sit down and just, it's not like, from a 911 standpoint, is at a state level, at like a state need and what our needs are. We don't, as long as we have the data, there's not a lot that we have to do on a data standpoint. As long as we have the data and we, you know, and we tell it, and like we tell our 911 system how to map the data to work it. There's not a lot that we have to do on the NG side, because it'll change. NG is changing so much. Like there's right now we push data into the system and then it does all the work. It's starting to go to the cloud, where we're going to start using web services and stuff like that. And we'll be able, it's changing so much that I don't know if there is, as long as we have good data and we have it in a good format, I think that's the important thing for this. Okay. Because it's changing so much, and it's partially NINA, it's partially vendor driven. It's very dynamic. So I would say, as long as we have good data that's in an appropriate format, like the NINA format. I mean, there is some, we could do some stuff to like make it a little bit more streamlined with the NINA standard, but that's the important thing.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, I'll kind of reiterate my question again. How can we specifically help you get there? I mean, do we need to, like, you know, like, what can we do? Like, do we need to kind of help you create some processes? Do we need to kind of help you with the outreach, talk to the 911 commission, et cetera? You know, like, we're kind of looking to help here, and like I said, you know, like, you have all of these resources kind of at the ready, and we all believe this is important. So kind of, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say this is the place for us to, you know, formalize a system to collect that. I mean, the important thing is just collecting the address data and getting it all formulated so that it works. And this is the place to do it. So I would say just us as an entity, you know, doing that together would be the biggest help. You know, being able to leverage it, all our everything we have here, to be able to collect all that data. That's the hardest part, is just getting the data.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like we need to have some follow-up conversations on
kind
of do that a little bit more
and
precisely.
Like, honestly, I think like that guideline is definitely something that we could work on, because I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but one issue that I've seen, especially with using parcel data, is that there's a lot of times where it's brand new parcel layer, and I'll get it in, and I end up having a laundry list of like 20 different things that I have to get fixed before I can use the data. Just street naming problems, and the unit information is wrong, or the whole. I could spend all day on this, but it's the whole. Is it a sub at, like, is the address 1A Main Street, or is it 1 Main Street unit A? Like there's stuff like that where there's a lot of stuff like that that needs to be cleaned up at the town level, which we could help with, just so we have the data, so we can get the data, bring it up, and then we have it, and then less having to mess around with junk like that.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, David put in the chat about keeping a parcel identifier when you add an address. I'm not sure if you do that, but I think maybe a next step is like, let's have a conversation about kind of like, let's make sure that we include some of this extraneous information, so to speak, in whatever we create, so that we can track it a little bit better.
I do not have a parcel identifier. I have a field for it. Do not have a parcel identifier, though. I'm sorry, an address identifier. Do not have one, but there's a field for it.
All right. So I see Scott has his hand raised, and then we'll circle back to Scott. Scott Charlotte. Sorry, Scott Gall. Go ahead.
This will be very quick, because I think Dan just answered part of it, and it's probably better for like a more detailed offline conversation. But I was curious, when you pull in other layers, whether they're the authoritative or non-authoritative, like what are the things where you see where you need to make updates, if it's to the address, the point location, like what are the things that change when you go through that, or where you see discrepancies across different sources? And you started to talk through that, but I think that is where it would help to get a sense of where you see opportunities or shortcomings in the different data sets, especially pulling them together.
Yeah, if I'm pulling actual GIS data, like the parcel data is usually the place where you go, oh, what's going on here? It's usually just the two big ones are street name inconsistencies, and like unit information. Like if they have a like one field says unit, but they have a full name field that has it as a sub address field, or as a suffix to an address number. So that's usually the places where we have to fix. The other thing that we have to do is, simply because our 911 system uses since we use community names, and we all know that there's certain towns out there that will remain nameless that have duplicate streets, and they might have different zip codes in the different areas, so it like works fine. But when you use one town name, you have duplicate street names. That's one of the places where we have to create our own street names, where we have to add stuff to a street name. So it might be Main Street, and Main Street City, and then Main Street Town or something, if a town has a city and a town section. Or it might be the old way, which I'm trying to get rid of, is like 1s and 2s, but that happens a lot, and like that's a place where we have to go and find out, like, okay, well, do you guys have, dear town, do you have a name for this, how you differentiate it? That way I can use the same thing. If they say no, then I have to find one, and then I usually ask them, like, hey, we want to add this to our 911 name, does this work for you? They say yes, then we use it. That's usually the places where we have to like come back a lot. It's like anything, Scott. Most of the time it's like, yep, that's the street name, that's the house number, done, and it's done. But you get those weird little anomalies out there.
Okay, thank you. So I'll let Scott Charlo ask his question now. Sorry for making you wait.
Actually, I think I put my hand down, but it doesn't really matter. All I was going to say is, with respect to the next gen, I would put it up back then, and it probably doesn't really matter anymore. But I know that they're working on finally getting away from the program that they use, that there may be room in there to negotiate with them or work with them to take another harder look at it. Because obviously I've worked with them for years, so it may be the right time to really reach out to them.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
their old system, their old mapping system is very, very old, and it's you know, basically hardwired that it's got to be this way. So yeah, and I think I had heard something about that. I forgot about that. I appreciate you for bringing that up. That they are looking to upgrade their system, which would definitely help.
Thank you for that. So we only got like a couple minutes left. So if anybody has any last minute questions, open it up to others at this point. But just bear in mind, we got like a couple minutes left. Lisette, looks like you have another question.
Thanks. Yeah, the updated feature class for parcels, is that still organized by town or is it statewide single feature class?
Statewide single feature class.
Okay, perfect. And then I did hear about the state geocoder, the statewide geocoder. Is that going to be rolled out?
It's still in the works. That is something that we're taking the lead on. But we're still tentatively aiming for end of year, but you know, it may get pushed depending on kind of technical challenges and just like capacity and kind of how fast we can get that working.
Right. And then the last one is, as the drinking water section is working to federate data into the CT Open Data Portal, we'll need some support regarding the standards. So I don't know if at some point, yeah.
Well, yeah, we are. So we have kind of standards that we've developed. They are not yet written down, but we are, you know, we have identified the need to write them down soon. And as people want to come on board and federate with the GeoData portal, we will get those out to everybody so that we can make sure that things are. So like, you know, like you do all the prerequisites before you kind of like actually send your data over, and then everything kind of meets the standard and gets published correctly.
Awesome. Thanks, Alfredo.
Any additional questions or comments? All right. Well, we're pretty much up on time, so I want to thank everyone for their patience and kind of getting through quite a lengthy meeting. And I think we covered a lot of ground and a lot of important information. If you have any questions or comments that, you know, maybe you just didn't feel like asking in this setting, please feel free to ask, reach out to me or Carl or David, you know, depending on what topic it is, but you can just route it through me if you're not sure. Once again, I just want to thank everybody for their time. And as usual, let me know if you have any questions, and look out for the newsletter coming out on November 1st. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.